Hey guys! In this video I wanted to teach you how to write the linear equation whenever you're given 2 points, and I'm going to use the solve for b method. So the first thing that you want to do anytime you're writing a linear equation is identify 2 points that are on the line. Now sometimes whenever you're looking at the graph, you can look really closely to make sure they go perfectly through the grid lines. And a lot of times the problem will be set up where 2 points will be given to you and you can see what they are. So the first thing will be to actually figure out what coordinate they are. I don't have a grid behind this, so let's just pretend that this point was 3, 2. And let's pretend that this point is -1, -3. So that'll be dependent on whatever problem you're starting with. So the slope-intercept form of a line is typically the equation they want you to write. And I'm sure you remember from Algebra 1 that slope-intercept is y equals mx plus b. So the reason why this is called the solve for b method is because we can usually find the slope, but it's the y-intercept that can be a little more tricky. What I've noticed Khan Academy does is they'll put it where it looks very close to the y-intercept being an integer, and you'll assume that it is, and if you put that in, you'll probably get it wrong because a lot of times it's either just above or just below the number line for the integer. So let's start first by finding m, which is the slope. So if you were using a graph, you could easily just count rise over run. So we know that slope is rise over run, but we also have a formula for slope. The formula for slope is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So because I don't have grid lines here, it's not as easy for me to count. And just because sometimes you're going to be given a problem where all they give you are the coordinates, it won't even have a graph that goes with it, I'm just going to plug it in to this formula. So let's call this x1, y1, and let's call this x2, y2. So I can start it up by doing 2 minus -1 over 3 minus -1. Sorry, 2 minus -3 and 3 minus -1. So if I go through and do that, 2 minus -3 is actually 2 plus 3, which is 5, and 3 minus -1 is 3 plus 1, which is 4. So this is going to be my slope. So I can even go in there and start by writing that as my next step. So it's going to be y equals 5 over 4x plus b. Now the last step is simply to pick one of the 2 coordinates and plug it in for xy to solve and figure out what your y-intercept is. So I usually pick the coordinate that has more positive numbers in it, just because it'll make the math a little bit more simple. So I'm going to use our x2, y2 here, and I'm going to plug the 3 in for the x and the 2 in for the y. So it's going to be 2 equals 5 over 4 times 3 plus b. And the next step is just to solve that equation. So if I multiply 5 over 4 by 3, it's really, you can pretend that it's 3 over 1. With multiplying fractions, you're going to multiply the numerators together and then multiply the denominators together. And then your last step to get b by itself is simply to move 15 over 4 to the other side. Now, because this is being combined with either addition or subtraction, to move it, you want to use the opposite operation. So there's no multiplication going on here, so you're not going to divide it on the other side. You have to move this entire term to the other side, so we're just going to use subtraction. That isolates b because 15 over 4 minus 15 over 4 is 0. So we can just cross it out. We don't actually have to write the 0. And we can just bring the b straight down. And then over here, we would have 2 minus 15 over 4. And depending on how good you are with fractions, you can just subtract those. I'm going to do that over here. So I'm going to make that 2 over 1 minus 15 over 4. Now, if you remember how to subtract fractions, you need them to have the same denominator. So in order to make the 1 actually a 4, I'm going to multiply by 4. So that's going to give me 4. And then when I multiply the 2 by 4, that's going to actually give me 8. So 8 over 4, if you did 8 divided by 4, you would actually have the same value as just 2. So now I can go through and subtract, and you only need to do the math with the numerators whenever you're doing addition and subtraction. Because we have the denominators the same, I just need to take 8 minus 15. And that'll give me negative 7 over 4. That's going to be my y-intercept, so negative 7 over 4 equals b. Now the last step that you need to follow is to plug this letter b that you just solved for, this y-intercept, back in to this equation that had the slope. Because when you're writing a linear equation, you need the x and the y to be in the equation so that it can represent any point that lies on that line. So I'm going to start with y equals, I can bring over my 5 over 4x, and then because this is negative 7 over 4, I can just write minus 7 over 4. If you prefer to write 7 over 4 as a decimal, you can do that too. It would be the same answer. And that would be your final answer of your equation. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions that you're still unsure of, feel free to leave me a question in the comments, and I hope you have a great day. See ya.